Okay, polynomials. To classify polynomials, you gotta do it by degree and by number of terms. So this first one, the number of terms are separated by plus signs or minus signs. So there's 3 terms, so that's a trinomial. And then the degree is the exponent, and the exponent is a 1 here and a 2 here, and you look at the biggest and it's a 2, so the degree is going to be a quadratic. And then you got to arrange the terms in standard form. Standard form is the biggest degree to the smallest, so it's going to be 4x squared minus 3x plus 2. And the lead coefficient is going to be 4. Okay, the next one, there's only one term, so it's called a monomial. The degree is the biggest exponent, and these are kind of together, so the degree is actually degree 9. You add them, 7y's and 2x's, degree 9. It is in standard form already, and the lead coefficient is 2. This one, there are 4 terms. So monomial is 1 term, trinomial is 3 terms, binomial is 2 terms, but none of these have 2 terms, and if it's just 4 terms, there's no special name, so just call it 4 terms. The degree, the biggest degree is 4, which is a quartic. And if we put them in standard form, this negative 4x to the 4's got to go first, then plus the 3x squared, plus the 2x, plus the 1, and the lead coefficient's a negative 4. This one is also a monomial, and its exponent is actually 0, because anything to the 0 is 1, and 4 times 1 is just 4, so we call it a constant. A number all by itself is just a constant. It is in order, and the lead coefficient would be 4. Alright, combining polynomials, and they represent them with these tiles, so this is helpful to help you realize that you can only combine like terms. So these rectangles, you can only add and subtract rectangles to rectangles. You cannot do it to squares. So x squares and x's are totally different units. They're different shapes, they're different sizes. You cannot combine them. You cannot say that 3x squared plus 2x's, you cannot say that's 5, I don't even know what you'd call it, 5x squared x's, because they are different shape and size, so you cannot combine them. So this first one is a minus, so you count up all your squares and you have 9x squareds, and there's none to take away, so you're just gonna have a total of 9x squares. But these green ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you got 8 here. Take away 5 here, so it's going to be 3 x's, and then your 1's, you got 10 1's, take away 2 1's, so it's going to be 8 1's. But now this one's kind of tricky because you're subtracting a negative, and you need to subtract both of these. You need to distribute that negative to both of them. So a negative negative is a positive. So these are actually positives. These red ones right here are actually positives. So my total, if I total all these pieces, you're going to have 3 of the squares. And now the rectangles over here, you got a negative 10x, and you're going to subtract a negative 6x. So that's really, that is changing those to positives. And positives and negatives cancel out. So 10 negatives and 6 positives. I got more negatives. I've got 4 more negatives. So I'm going to have left over 4 negatives. Okay, now your 1's, if you've got 9 1's, 9 1's subtract 6 1's. 9 take away 6, you're going to have 3 1's left over. So that should be your answer. Okay, these are all negative, but you've got a bunch of negatives and you're adding a bunch more negatives, so you're just going to total up how many negatives you have. The one before, if you're subtracting a negative, that actually changes it to positives, but these are all going to stay negatives, and you're just going to combine them up. So if you got 7 negative squares and 1 negative square, that's going to total and give you 8 negative squares. And then if you got 5 of the rectangles and 9 of the rectangles and you total them up, that's a total of negative 14 x's. And then your 1s, 9 negatives and 10 negatives is a total of 19 negatives. Okay, now multiplication. If you're going to multiply, you've got to use the distributive property. You've got to FOIL first times first. 2m times 8m is 16m squared. Outside times outside. 2m times negative 6 is negative 12m. Inside times inside. 2 times 8m's is going to be 16m's. Last times last. 2 times negative 6 is a negative 12. And we can combine these middle terms. We can combine these m's. These m's are just like the rectangles. So I got 16 positives and I got 12 negatives. That is going to total and give me 4 positives, because I got more positives than I do negatives. So the product is 16m squared plus 4m minus 12. The factors are 2m plus 2, 8m minus 6. Let's distribute. 3p times p is going to be 3p squared. In front of this p there's a 1, so you times your numbers and then you times your letters. 3p times 8 is going to be 24p. A negative 6 times 1p is a negative 6p. Negative 6 times 8 is going to be a negative 48. Total your p's, 6 negatives and 24 positives. You got a lot more positives. So 3p squared plus 18 p's minus 48 ones. And that is your total answer. So if you had to draw a picture of this, you'd have 3 of the squares, but they'd be blue because they're positive. 18 of the rectangles, they'd be whatever color positive is. And then 48 negative of these little 1 cubes. Alright, this one. N times n is n squared. N times a minus 2 is a minus 2n. 2 times n is a plus 2n. 2 times a minus 2 is a minus 4. And these like terms, if you've got 2 positives and 2 negatives, you really got nothing. They cancel out. So your answer, your product, is just n squared minus 4. And n minus 6 squared is n minus 6 times n minus 6. Distribute n times n is n squared. N times negative 6 is negative 6n. Negative 6 times n is a negative 6n. And negative 6 times negative 6 is a positive 36. Combine your n's, 6 negatives and 6 negatives. N squared and negative 12n plus 36. Alright. Okay, now factor each completely. Some of these are easy, some are medium, some are kind of nasty. Let's look at this one first. First of all, if it starts with the 1, it's pretty easy. They're way easy. So this is the product, and we need to write the factors. The factors are going to look just like what we did. And because it's 1n squared, I know it's got to be 1n and 1n. But now it's a positive 3n and a negative 28. It's got to multiply and give you a negative 28. The only way you can times and get a negative is if one of them is positive and one of them is negative. So, a negative 28, I got my options. I got a 1 and a 28. I got a 2 and a 14. I got a 4 and a 7. And that's it. So one of these got to be negative, one's got to be positive. I'm drawn to the 4 and the 7 because I need to make out of them a 3. So now I just got to figure out which one's negative and which one's positive. 4 minus 7 equals a negative 3, and 7 minus 4 equals a 3. So I'm going with the 7 positive, and a 4 negative. 7's got to be positive, 4's got to be negative. And that is it. And let's do this one. This one's easy right here. Let's do this one next, because it starts with a 1. So same thing. I know it's got to be 1p and 1p. Okay, they add and give a negative, but they times and give a positive. So I know it's got to be minus minus. The only way I can times and get a positive is a positive times a positive, or a negative times a negative. And because they add and give you negative, I know they both got to be negatives. So here's my options. 48. 1 and 48. 2 and 24. 3 and 16. 4 and 20. No. 4 and 14. No, not 4 and 14. 4 and 12. 6 and 8. And that's it. Okay, I need to add them and get a 14, so I'm going to go with the 6 and 8. And they both got to be negatives. The order doesn't matter. So it's going to be a 6 there and an 8 there. Okay, those two are probably the easiest. The next, this guy right here is actually pretty easy also. So 4x squared minus 8x, I'm going to try for the greatest common factor. If there's two terms, let's try and see if there's a common term to both of them. I can divide them both by 4x. So if I rewrite this as a times problem, it would be 4x multiplied by 1x, and a negative 8x divided by 4x is just a negative 2. So these are the factors, and you can check it by just distributing and multiplying through. So 4x times x is 4x squared. 4x times a minus 2 is a minus 8x, and that is it. So these are the factors. Okay, now let's do the grouping. Let's do this one right here. If you've got 4 terms, we're going to group them together into 2 mini problems. And usually you're going to group either the first with the second or the first with the third. And in this instance, I'm going to group the first with the third, just because it will give me, watch this, 40v cubed minus 80v. And then if I group the second with the last, it's going to give me, I'll do it over here, 48v squared minus 96. Okay, now I did that because my signs now match up. That's a positive, that's a negative, that's a positive, that's a negative. So I'm not going to have to do any fancy manipulating. Okay, now 40v cubed and the 80v, I'm going to divide them both by as much as I can, the greatest common factor. Divide them both by 40v. Divide that by 40v. So if I rewrite it as a times problem, it's going to be 40v times 40 divided by 40 is 1. V cubed divided by v is v squared. Negative 80 divided by 40 is a negative 2. And v divided by v is just 1. And 2 times 1 is just 2. So leave that. Get on the other side, this other mini problem. 48 and 96. I gotta find what goes into both 48 and I think it is 48. Let me check. 96 divided by 48. It is. So I'm going to divide this by 48, and I'm going to divide this by 48. So if I write it as a times problem, it's going to be 48 times v squared minus 2. Okay, now I look at them, and this v squared minus 2 is showing up in both groups. So I'm going to factor a v squared minus 2 out of both groups. And it's going to be v squared minus 2 times this guy, 40v, and this guy plus 48. So this one goes here, this one goes here. But you're not done, because this group is not simplified, it's not factored out as far as it can go. You can factor out of 40 and 48, you can factor an 8 out of each. So if you divide them both by 8, that's going to leave you with v squared minus 2 in one group, and in the other group, if you divide that by 8, that's 5v, and if you divide that by 8, that's 6, and then put an 8 right there times 8. So those are your factors. There's kind of 3 factors: 8, 5v plus 6, and v squared minus 2. Okay, now these other two right here are only for the honors. So the regular kids, you guys don't worry about these, just fast forward. But the honors, here we go. Okay, these are the toughest because if you look at 9x squared, 19, they got nothing in common. 9, 19, and 24, they got nothing in common. And this does not start with a 1, so it's going to be kind of a pain in the butt. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take 9x squared, copy and paste it. We're going to rewrite 19x as the sum of 2 terms, and we're going to copy and paste the minus 24. So we're going to split 19x up into two terms. So now I know this, the very first times the very last. 9 multiplied by a negative 24, 9 times a negative 24 equals a negative 216. And I know that the very middle times the very middle will also equal a negative 216. So they got that in common. But they have to add and give you 19. So a negative 216, I know if it times to give you negative, one's got to be positive, one's got to be negative. So I can start making a list. 1 and 216, 2 and 108, 216, get your calculator, 216 divided by 3, enter. 3 and 72, 216 divided by 4, enter. 4 and 54, 216, skip 5, divided by 6. 6 and 36, 216 divided by 7. Nothing, 216 divided by 8. 8 and 27. Okay, I need to make a 19. I'm going to subtract because one of them is positive, one of them is negative, and I think we can do it with 8 and a 27. So it needs to be a positive 19. So that means I've got more positives than I do negatives. A negative 8 times 27 is a negative 216, but a negative 8 plus 27 is positive 19. So there we go. Now, if I put them in here, maybe I'll put the negative here and the positive here, because then it goes positive, negative, and that's going to be nice to group when the signs are already in order. So here we go. Now if I group them, I'm just going to group the first two and group the last two. So these first two right here, they got nothing in common except for an x. I can divide that by x, I can divide that by x. So if I rewrite it, it's going to be x times 9x minus 8. Okay, now this second group, 27 and 24, I can divide them both by 3. So if I rewrite that as a times problem, it's going to be 3 times 9x minus 8. Now that shows up in both groups. The signs are perfect. So my answer is going to be 9x minus 8 in one. The other group's going to be an x plus a 3. The x comes there, the 3 comes there, and we got it. Okay, last one. Let's look at this one right here. Okay, 10, 13, and 30, they got nothing in common. So you cannot factor anything out. So I'm going to do 10 times 30. 10 times a negative 30. 10 times a negative 30 equals a negative 300. So I'm going to rewrite this. 10m squared plus something minus 30. Okay, I'm going to rewrite 13 as the sum of two terms. Okay, they got to times and give you 300. So you start making a list. 300 is going to be 1 and 300, 2 and 150, 3 and 100. 300 divided by 4. 4 and 75. 300 divided by 5 is going to be 5 and 60. 300 divided by 6 is going to be 6 and 50. I don't think 7. 300 divided by 7. 300 divided by 8. 300 divided by 9. 310. We already got 10. And 30. Okay, I gotta get a 13. So this is, I don't think we got a 13 out of anywhere. So this one's kind of nasty. 300 divided by 12. 12 and 25. Okay, I think we can make it with 12 and 25. So, it's got to be negative 13, so the 25's got to be negative. The 12's got to be positive. And again, I'm going to go put the negative 25m here and the positive 12m there. So negative 25 and a positive 12, they add and give you negative 13, but they times and give you negative 300. Now let's group them. If you group the first two together, I got them in order, positive, negative, positive, negative. Divide them both by 5m. Divide that by 5m. So that's going to be 5m times 2m minus 5. And the second group, 12 and 30, divide them both by 6. So it's going to be 6 times 2m minus 5. And then it's going to be 2m minus 5 times that by 5m plus 6. If you want, you can check your answer by distributing through, and you should times them all out, add your like terms, and end up with 10m squared minus 13m minus 30. Okay, another sheet of factoring. So here we go. I'm just gonna do, I'm not gonna work them all out. Let's just do half of them. So this goes for everybody. There's two terms, try the GCF. Divide both of them by the greatest amount of common factors. 4 and 10, I can divide them both by 2. And now the letters. This has some R's and S's, this just has one R. So the greatest common amount of R's is only 1. So I can divide them both by 2R. So if you rewrite this as factors, it's going to be 2R times 4 divided by 2 is 2. R squared divided by R is R. And S4. Negative 10R divided by 2R is going to be a negative 5. Okay, now let's look at this. We'll just go down this column. Grouping. These two go together. So I can divide those two. 45 and 60, the greatest. I know I can divide them by 5. But I think something bigger than 5. Can I divide them both by 9? No. Maybe it is just 5. Okay, let's divide them both by 5. No, it is not 5. It's 15. I can divide both these guys by 15. And since it's bigger than 5, I'm going to use 15. And I can take R squareds out of both of them. So 15R squared multiplied by 45 divided by 15, that's 3. R cubed divided by R squared is R. A negative 60 divided by 15 is just going to be a negative 4. And R squared divided by R squared is just 1. And 4 times 1 is 4. So there you go. And you know you took the greatest because these got nothing in common. So if I would have done them both by 5, it would be 5r squared times 9r minus 12. And because 9 and 12 both have a 3, you can divide them both by 3. So then I knew that 5 times 3 is 15. So 5 is not the biggest, but 15 is the biggest. So if you factor them and they still got something in common, you chose the wrong number. You need to choose a bigger number. Okay, the next group, this negative 120r and the plus 160. Okay, I can divide both of these by 12 and 16. What's the common 12 and 16? Divide them both by 4. So it's going to be 40. Divide both of them by 40. So it's going to be 40 times a minus 3r plus 4. And now my signs don't match up because that's a positive 3r, that's a negative 3r, that's a minus 4, that's a positive 4. So don't divide by 40, divide by negative 40. Because a negative divided by negative is a positive, and a positive divided by negative is a negative. Now they match up. So now it's 3r minus 4 times 15r squared minus 40. Okay, but that is not the answer. 3 and 4 are done, they got nothing in common, but 15 and 40 do. You can factor out a 15 and 40, you can divide them both by, you can factor a 5 out. If you so if you divide them both by 5, you're left with 3r squared minus 8, and then just put the 5 out here. And that's it. Okay. So I'll leave you for these other 3. Everyone needs to do this. No, let's do this guy right here. This guy and this guy are the same, kind of. Because look, 6x squared minus 6x minus 36. Move number 1. You can factor out of each of these 3 before you even begin. You can factor out a 6 from all of them. So if you do that, it's going to be 6 times x squared minus x minus 6. And now this is a piece of cake. If it starts with 1, it's a piece of cake because it's going to be 1x and 1x. So I'm just going to put the 6 out here. What times this gives you negative 6, adds and gives you negative 1. And it's going to be a negative 3 and a positive 2. Negative 3 times 2 gives you negative 6. Negative 3 add 2 gives you negative 1. So that's it. This guy's the same way. Factor 2 out of everything. And then this one, the honors can do this. Multiply your first times your first. Rewrite 8x as 2 terms. And then use grouping. Alright. Now, that's it for the new stuff. This is all a review from the first few months of school. So here we go. An equation. These are exponential equations. Exponential equations, you can't really touch the exponents till your bases are the exact same. So let's change this base from a 4. If we break it down, that's going to be 2 squared, and the same with 32. 32 is 4 times 8. 4 is a 2 times 2. 8 is 2 times 2 times 2. So I can swap out my 4 for 2 squared. And I can swap out my 32 for 2 to the 5th. Okay, now that your bases are the same, now we can play with the exponents. So, I need to put the exponents were 2x plus 7, and the exponents on this were x plus 3. So I'm just going to ignore my bases, but now my exponents, if I'm going to put a 2 with the 2x plus 7, you need to times both of them. So it's going to be 4x plus 14. And now if I put a 5 there, I got to times both of them. It's going to be 5x plus 15. Okay, now it's just an equation. So I'm going to get my x's on the same side. I'm going to minus 4x, minus 4x. So I'm going to have 14 equals 5x, take away 4x is just 1x, plus 15 take away 15 from that side, take away 15 from that side, you should end up with x is going to be a -1 to make that true. So if I plug a -1 in, it will give me the same answer on both sides. Okay, the middle one, 81, break that down to 9 times 9, break down 9 to 3 and 3, break down 9 to 3 and 3, 243, let's do the same thing, divide that by 9, 9 and 27, 9 is a 3 and a 3, 27 is a 9 and a 3, and a 9 is a 3 and a 3. So you're going to change 81 for 3 to the 4th, and you're going to change 243 for 3 to the 5th, but here's the problem. 81 equals 3 to the 4th, but it's not really 81, it's 1 over 81, so that equals 3 to the -4th. So if you've got a fraction, you're dividing, your exponent has to be negative, so this has got to be negative. But that's okay because my bases are still the same, they're both 3's. So now I need to put the exponent in, which was a t, and this is a t minus 2. So I got to times them because I got two levels of exponents. You multiply them, so -4t equals 5t minus 10. And I'm going to minus 5t's, minus 5t's, a minus 9t's equals a minus 10. Divide by a minus 9, divide by a minus 9. So t has got to be 10/9. It's a fraction, which is alright, but it's positive because the negative divided by negative is going to be positive. So not too bad. Okay, now the last one. It's an inequality, same thing, bust up 64. That's 8 times 8. And that is 2 times 2 times 2. And that is 2 times 2 times 2. So you need to exchange 64 for 2 to the 6th. And then put an x there, less than 32. 32, I'm going to go upside down. That's 8 times 4, that's 2 times 2. And 8 is, 2 times 2 times 2. So 32 is really 2 to the 5th. And x plus 2. So times your exponents. It's going to be 6x is less than 5x plus 10. Don't forget to distribute to both. And then minus 5x, 1x is less than 10, which is your answer. But if it were a negative x is less than 10, you would need to change it to, I can have always positive x's. Divide by -1, divide by -1, that would be a positive x, and that would be a -10. And if you divide by a negative or times by a negative, you need to change the direction of your inequality. But this wasn't. This was just everything was positive, so we were okay. So this was x is less than 10. But don't forget, if you divide both sides by a negative, you got to change the direction.